Everybody, welcome to today's seminar series, and welcome for everybody online. People, I think particularly online who don't know me, my name's Anthony Shakshaft. I'm the Director of Research here at the Poche Seminar for Indigenous Health. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge that we're on the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples here in Brisbane and pay our respects.
Sluisburg this often.
Who's got the?
Can you hear that both okay?
Mute. Okay.
Thanks, and just pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and future. And of course, I would particularly like to acknowledge, thank, and pay tribute to our First Nations colleagues who are with us in the room here this morning and also with us online. And that obviously includes our presenter, Steve Pegans. It gives me just enormous pleasure to welcome Steve. The idea of him potentially coming up to talk to us this morning was really made possible by Professor Michael Doyle, who's here as well. So he's a researcher and done a lot of work in prison health and the alcohol space, based at the University of Sydney. For people who don't know Michael, he's a Bardi man from the Kimberley area. So it's absolutely, I feel like I've hit the jackpot today, getting to sit here between Michael and Steve. So it's a great honour, Steve, to have you with us. So you've been, what you're going to talk about the up on the slide there, the Native American residents, and the work you've been doing there for a long time, I think since 2008.
Yep.
So thank you for making the time to come and see us. I know you're in Sydney and you know, agreed to make the trek up to here to Brisbane. So we're really excited and thrilled to have you. And I've only met Steve about half an hour ago myself, and he's already had a number of great stories in his back pocket that he's shared with us. So I think today's talk is going to be fantastic. So thanks again, Steve, and I'll hand over to you.
Okay. Bonjour, Josh Jeshi Wang Nabe, Nanado, Nene, Disnakas, Wabshishido Dem, Nimbising Nudun Jaba. I don't expect anyone to understand what I said. But what I said in my Ojibwe language, I introduced my name and the clan that I'm from and the people that I'm from. So I'll translate that into English. So I said bonjour. I could tell you a long story about that. Bonjour is an Ojibwe word. It's not to be confused with the French word bonjour, which means good day. Nana Bojo was an Ojibwe trickster, a mythical half-spirit, half-man person. He created lots of things. There's lots of folklore stories of my people about Nana Bush or Nana Bojo. And often when we greet strangers, particularly from our different First Nations communities, we would always acknowledge Nana Bojo if it was a stranger, because Nana Bush was a trickster, and if you didn't treat Nana Bush with respect, he might play a trick on you, and if he did, you probably wouldn't like it. So it's always safe to greet strangers by acknowledging Nana Bojo, by offering greetings that way. So I offer greetings, and my name is Blue Fast Water Spirit Man, and I'm very fortunate that's not on my driver's license because I wrapped around a couple of times. But I'm from the Martin clan, and I'm from Nipissing First Nation. So I would like to acknowledge the original caretakers of this beautiful land, the area in which I'm in today. I would also like to acknowledge the elders of the past, the present, and those that will be emerging as elders. And I'd like to start off by singing a song to share my gratitude for being here today. So I'm going to sing a song. It won't be a long one, but I'll start off. That song was a very short jingle dress song at a traditional gathering or powwow. Our women would dance that song. It's known as a healing dance or a medicine dress. The Ojibwe words that I sang in there was Menado, Binego, Binese Shimoa. So that means the spirit of the bird is with us, and that's what I sang. So I guess today I'm going to talk about some of the work that I do in Toronto. Toronto, the city in which I live in, is an Indigenous word. What it means in the Iroquois language, the people of the Mohawk, the Cayuga, the Seneca, and Tuscarora, it means the place where the fish fence is, or the trees that stick out of the water. That's what that means. And I work at a place called Native Men's Residence, or NAMI Res, we call it for short. And we offer services that I call in the 3 H's. So we work with housing, homelessness, and health. And a lot of our work, we offer our services with a kind heart and with kindness to the people that we work with. So if I can go to the next slide, please. Oh, you want me to do it? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. So, is it okay if I sit down? Yeah, okay. Let's see here. How do I go to the next slide?
The bottom left.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay. So, in Toronto, every so often and across Canada, they do a census among homeless peoples. And across Canada, there's a disproportionate number of Indigenous peoples that experience homelessness in all of the major cities and now in some of the smaller towns across Canada. Well, Toronto has been doing a street needs assessment for quite some time. So the results of the 2021 street needs assessment demonstrate that Indigenous peoples that live in Toronto are overrepresented among the homelessness population. The exact number of homeless people represents during that census about 15% of all the people counted. And there's been 5 consecutive street needs assessments, and over the last 5, the homelessness numbers among the Indigenous populations haven't changed. And I found that rather astounding, because in Toronto, among folks that are homeless or not homeless, we have a major drug problem. And I know lots of people who have died from overdoses, but yet our numbers among the homeless population continue to climb.
Just hold it, please. Okay.
Good, that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So, and then those who are experiencing homelessness in Toronto among the gender lines, the majority among male, female, and transgendered, men represent the highest proportion of those experiencing homelessness at 59%. And Indigenous people are more likely to experience chronic homelessness at a young age. And this is often a result of negative experiences that Indigenous peoples have gone through within Canada related to colonialism. I understand colonialism is something that also happened here in Australia. Well, Canada's experiences with colonialism stem from the days of residential schools. In the late 1800s, we had this awful piece of legislation that still stands. It's called the Indian Act, and it's probably the most racist piece of legislation maybe in the world, at least definitely in Canada. And at one time, it controlled every aspect of an Indigenous person's life in Canada. But in the late 1800s, the Indian Act was amended because Indigenous peoples, we weren't dying off as quick as the colonial powers thought we would. They thought we were going to be extinct, race going extinct. Proud to say they were so wrong. We're the fastest growing population in Canada, and we're resilient. And I try to help people make a comeback to our prominence that we once had. But with the Indian Act, it made it at one point where it was compulsory or mandatory for First Nations children to attend residential schools. Residential school experience in Canada was horrible. The purpose of it was to eradicate Indigenous cultures, eradicate our languages. That wasn't working quickly enough. And residential schools had a 150-year history. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1994. My grandparents attended residential schools. And then a little bit after residential schools, I guess, again, Indigenous peoples were not assimilating as quickly as the governments had hoped. And so they introduced another piece of legislation that allowed child welfare agencies to come on to First Nations communities and take away First Nations children and place them in non-Indigenous homes or group homes or foster homes. And that's what happened to my mother and all of my uncles and aunts, except for a couple of them. And my mother was taken and placed in a French-Canadian family. She grew up speaking French. She lost her first Ojibwe language. But I'm fortunate because my generation, I didn't have to deal with those things, and I didn't really have to deal with heavy traumas like the generations before me. So I understand the lost generation experiences are very similar to those of First Nations peoples within Canada. So often a lot of people that experience homelessness within Canada, whether they're Indigenous or not, it's a direct result of trauma, intergenerational. Often people try to mask their trauma or treat it with illicit drugs. And often the addictions become so powerful that they end up being homeless and try to drown their sorrows with alcohol or treat their pain with street drugs. So those are direct results of what contribute to homelessness, particularly Indigenous homelessness. So Indigenous people are also report a high degree of health challenges. And in fact, Indigenous peoples in Canada are often at the bottom of almost every meaningful statistical category when it comes to the social determinants of health. So I hope things are better here for the Indigenous folks here in Australia. So this is an overview of the last 5 consecutive street needs assessments. The figures in the green, where they only hover from 15 to 16%, is the overall count of Indigenous peoples experiencing homelessness. And then the figures in the blue represent those that are sleeping rough outdoors. And as you can see, at the highest point in 2013, 38% of those sleeping rough outdoors, not staying in a shelter or a form of institution, were Indigenous. And fortunately, the numbers dropped a little bit in 2021, down to 23%. So those numbers are rather stark and troubling. In some of the Western Canadian provinces, for example, Winnipeg, the homeless numbers for Indigenous peoples are more around 90%, and they're much more higher than the percentages in Toronto, which is very troubling. So NAMI Res is a small but mighty and powerful organization for the people that we serve. We're very much a culturally based organization. And the presentation is our very long mission statement. I used to have a challenge among our staff when I'd have quarterly all-staff meetings, and they would get a prize if they could recite the mission statement, which I never could. I'm not going to read it to you, but basically it describes our mission is to provide housing for Indigenous peoples experiencing homelessness, particularly men. We try to help prop them up by infusing culture into their lives and bringing them back into our community and giving them a sense of community as well as a strong sense of brotherhood to make them whole and to live self-determined lives. So non-res, we have 81 staff. We started offering services back in 1983. So we've been around for over 40 years. Over the last few years, we've really grown exponentially. And our services, we operate 2 homeless shelters, which I'll get into more detail afterwards. They operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even during a pandemic. We all went to work in person, never stopped coming in, because we recognized if we were to close down, those men that rely on our shelter beds or even our halfway house beds for the Indigenous men leaving corrections, they would end up on the streets again, or the men leaving corrections would end up having to go back to jail. So we never closed. Our 2 shelters are abstinence-based. So they're for Indigenous men that abstain from drugs or alcohol. Now, we're not foolish. We know our men do dabble in drugs and alcohol once in a while. But in Toronto, the shelter system, there's approximately 54 shelters in the city of Toronto for homeless people. About 12 years ago, the city wanted all the shelters to move towards a harm reduction based type of service. I refused. I did not comply. I told the city, what are you going to do to us? We're not going to listen. We're going to continue being abstinence based. And they said, oh, you might lose your funding. Okay. And I started getting ready for a media campaign. We had a former Ontario Regional Grand Chief who used our services in the past. And he credits our services to saving his life and helping him live an abstinence-free lifestyle, which enabled him to become a good leader for our communities. So I asked him if he would do some media for us. He was more than happy to. Fortunately, it didn't come down to that because I spoke to our city councillor for the area in which our services are, and our election was coming. So I told him, hey, I think the neighbors will be really happy that we're moving towards a harm reduction type of shelter. And, maybe you should talk to the general manager for shelter support and homeless services and convince him that we're not moving towards a harm reduction type of shelter. My rationale was, if all the shelters in the city of Toronto become harm reduction, where the heck are homeless people going to go if they want to dry out for a little bit or take a break from using? And there's power to having diversity of types of services and options for people. So I think that convinced our city councillor as well. I think he was a little worried about the upcoming election. So I had a very compelling argument and remained to be an abstinence-based shelter. We support Indigenous men all throughout the city of Toronto. Toronto is a rather large geographical area. The population of Toronto is approximately 3 million people, but the surrounding areas, the greater Toronto area, it's closer to about 6 or 7 million. We started getting into housing as well. 16 years ago, the housing market in Toronto was, prices were climbing all the time. The cost of buying a house was becoming more and more expensive. And, it didn't take much to read the writing on the wall that the rental market would follow suit and that housing prices would become unaffordable for renters. So despite the housing market with the prices always climbing, I started writing grants and we acquired houses. And I always tell people the cure to homelessness is simple. It's affordable housing. That's what makes someone not be homeless. So we got into the housing business. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And we specialized in services for Indigenous men from a culturally based lens. In Canada, there's an abundance of services for Indigenous women, and there's a very powerful Indigenous women's movement within Canada. And I support this. It's very much needed. We love our sisters, we love our mothers, we love our aunties and our daughters. So it's needed. But unfortunately, in Canada, there's very few services that support Indigenous men. Perhaps it's because there's this idea that men in general have privilege. But when it comes to Indigenous community, I don't think we share the same privilege as other cultures in Canada. So we specialize in providing culturally based services for men. A lot of services help our men to understand our traditional responsibilities as Indigenous men. And one of them is becoming and picking up those things again, such as a hunter-gatherer. Our men were traditionally those that would go out and hunt and gather food. We'd hunt large game. We would do fishing. And also we would teach the young boys skills that they would need to know to become good hunters and gatherers. They would also teach the young boys skills that they would need to know to become good fathers, to pass on that male knowledge. We have different teachings for men, as so do women. So we need to pass those along for the future generations. And much of it has been lost, but we're starting to pick those things up again and help regain those knowledges. So NAMI Res is a not-for-profit for Indigenous, by Indigenous, governed by Indigenous organization. Our circle of directors is what other organizations would refer to as a board of directors. We have 2 spots for non-Indigenous peoples as well. And I'm very proud that we also serve non-Indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples in Canada, I'm sure just like Indigenous peoples here, we were extremely good at working with the first folks that came to our lands that were homeless. We were so good at it that the first group of homeless people that came to our territories, we were so kind and generous to them that they overthrew our governance structures. They took over our lands. They did colonialism. So our peoples were very good at that as well, helping folks to settle and not be homeless. And then things changed. So I'm very proud of the fact that we continue to serve non-Indigenous homeless people. In Canada, we have over 500 years of experience doing that. And we're very good at it. We also offer a cultural-based approach to our services. And we know our cultural-based approaches also work for non-Indigenous. And we share that with them also. And as I mentioned previously, we offer shelter. We offer transitional shelter. We offer housing. And we offer health services. We have a very robust street outreach team where we travel around the city in vans, and we'll have staff that will reach out to folks that are sleeping rough, whether it's in a park tent, sleeping under a bridge, hiding away somewhere in the bush. We'll offer them services and bring the services to them. And we offer a culturally based continuum of care. And there's a few photos of our staff. These are a little bit dated, these photos. But this is our emergency shelter where all of our services began. The NAMI Res shelter is situated in Midtown Toronto, a little bit off of Midtown, a little bit to the west. And we currently offer 71 beds for Indigenous and non-Indigenous men of shelter spaces. We provide a temporary shelter. And as I mentioned previously, it's abstinence-based. I'm very proud of the fact that the food that we prepare for the men in our shelters are prepared by a chef. Wow, those homeless guys must be lucky, you might be thinking. But the way I look at it, the food that we eat to nourish our bodies is medicine. If we feed them crap, how can we expect them to have good outcomes? If we have a happy kitchen, the folks preparing the food, and they put good thoughts and good energy in preparing that food for the people that eat it, that good thoughts and good energy will come out in the individuals that eat it. So we make sure that the food is always nutritious, delicious, and nourishes the body. So, I insist that we have high quality food. And I don't know about how things are here, but in Canada, our food prices are always rising for some reason. And that's really one of the few budgets that I have every year where we increase the budget to accommodate those rising prices because we know it's the right thing to do. We also have a registered nurse. So about 15 years ago, I used to be the shelter manager. And I wrote a grant to hire a nurse as well as intensive case managers. I was seeing huge gaps in services. And I thought our men could benefit from having health services from a registered nurse. In Canada, there's a lot of discrimination for Indigenous peoples when they go seek medical services at hospitals. There's been a number of research studies that prove racism kills. A lot of stories I could share where I've known people who have gone to the hospital and they've been treated with prejudice, where doctors wouldn't believe that a person was not on drugs who was seeking treatment, or they weren't drunk when they were seeking treatment, but they needed help. So we hired a nurse. I was able to access some homeless dollars to hire the nurse. But then later, the homeless funder, once they realized that their dollars are funding a nurse, they said, we can't fund the nurse. They said that the health services are a provincial responsibility in Canada, and the federal funds cannot fund the nurse. I said, okay, fine. I was fortunate enough that I knew a philanthropist, and they funded our nurse for about 10 years. Put a barrier in front of me often, I'll find a way around it. Very resourceful. I can be stubborn to a fault, but I think that's a good thing at times. And so our men, we focus on providing quality services. I often tell people when they come visit, I've had politicians come visit, some NHL celebrities, some Indigenous ones. I often tell them, if you come visit our shelter, a lot of shelters are not very well run. They're kind of gross. I wouldn't send my dog there. I tell them, when you walk through the doors, you notice the absence of the smell of ass. Because we run a quality service and it's very nice and it's clean. Other shelters are not the same. So that usually either gets a funny reaction out of them, or their guy just opened real big and a little bit red. But I encourage them to visit other shelters and they could see the difference in the quality of the services we offer. This is our transitional shelter. It's called Sagate. Sagate in the Ojibwe language can be translated a couple of ways. It means the sun that comes up over the horizon in the morning, or the new dawn. So it's a shelter that's strictly for Indigenous men. It's currently 25 beds. We're not going to go any larger than that. The difference between Sagate and the Namire shelter that's just down the street is the rooms are set up to have single and double occupancy. Each one of the rooms has its own 3-piece bath. It has a shower, a toilet, and a sink. Whereas at the Namire shelter, it's communal bathrooms and toilets. So we constructed it that way on purpose because we wanted the men that use that service to be prepared to eventually leave and have their own space and be able to take care of it and be comfortable living on their own. And often it's difficult for people who had many years of being homeless and sleeping outdoors rough to transition back into living in a dwelling. So we did that purposely. One We have way more cultural supports at this service than we do elsewhere. We have a staff who is called Ashka Bewis in the Ojibwe language and in the Cree language. Ashka Bewis means traditional helper. So the role of our Ashka Bewis is to work with our elders, to work with our people that hold traditional knowledge or knowledge keepers, to bring in ceremony, to bring in cultural types of programs. And we do this rather well. We have a life skills program called Apina Mowanin. In Ojibwe, that means having confidence in myself. A lot of the men that use our services, when they've been homeless for a long time, they really lack confidence in themselves. They may have negative images of themselves. So we try to instill that confidence back in them, let them know they're worthy human beings, that they deserve to live and thrive. And we do this with kindness. We do this heart work for them to help them to feel whole again. The Apinimnoanim Cultural Life Skills Program, some of the different things we do are seasonal. In Canada, we have 4 seasons. I called my daughter last week and she shared with me that we had 30 centimeters of snow that day. So I'm really happy to be here. So we offer usually Ojibwe language classes on Monday mornings for all the men that use the service. I also recognize that we have a diversity of languages among our Indigenous populations in Canada. We have about 56 different language groups, but the more predominant languages within Canada are Cree and Ojibwe. In the summer months, we offer the Cree language as well, which is similar to Ojibwe. I can understand some of the Cree speakers. The reason we do the language is that's key to understanding very intimate aspects of our cultures. It ties us to the land. There's understandings within our language that you can't gain from the English language. Although we are all very fortunate that we have the English language, because I can converse to you and you can all understand, just as all Indigenous peoples in Canada converse in English and we can understand each other. So we do the language. We do circles on Friday. I think that would be similar to what you call yarning circles. We call them either talking circles or healing circles. Those usually take place Friday afternoons. We do them Friday afternoons on purpose. Because I remember when I was a young person, Friday afternoons, if I got paid, I had a little bit of money in my pocket. The wild side of me want to go out and party, right? So we recognize that with the men. So we give them an opportunity to speak and express their thoughts and feelings for the week, prepare themselves for the weekend, and be able to express whatever things they wish to express, whether their thoughts of gratitude, whether they're dealing with hard feelings or hurts. They'll have that opportunity in that safe space to let them out. On Tuesdays, we teach drumming. No, I'm going on a rant. How much time do I have?
Yeah, we need to finish about 12.
Okay, all right, so I can share this. So the drumming, you heard me drum at the beginning. The drum has had a very profound effect in my life. I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the drum. As a young person, I did not grow up in the culture. I did not grow up understanding or being able to speak the Ojibwe language. The drum is what brought it all together for me. As a young boy, my parents brought me to my first powwow, and I remember it very clear. I remember before I arrived at the powwow, I could hear the drumming off in the distance. And when I heard it, it drew me in like a magnet. It made me instantly curious. I wanted to be there. I wanted to learn. I wanted to sing. But the problem with me back then was I was ridiculously shy. So I would be content just listening and wanting to be there, but being too shy to go up and ask. A little bit later in life, I learned to drum. I went to places where they taught drumming. And eventually later, I learned the teachings on our drum, the story of the origins of our drum. I know about 3 different stories on the drums from different First Nations groups across Canada. I know the Ojibwe teaching. I know 2 of them. I also know the Dakota or Sioux people's teaching on the drum. And the drum is, in the Ojibwe language, we call it Ode We Gun. What that means literally is the heartbeat. And the drum, they say it represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And it was something that was given from a woman to the men a long time ago. Ojibwe people were at war with the Dakota people or the Sioux people. They say our battle with the Sioux people went on for generations. And through that fighting, our men lost their way. We forgot to provide for our families. We forgot to teach the young boys how to become good hunters and gatherers. We were slowly losing our ways, and our people were suffering because of it. Starvation was close to happening for many of our people. The people were hungry all the time. Younger generations thought this was the way life was, and that's all they could expect. But a young girl went out and prayed. She cared for the people, and a drum came to her. And a voice told her, this drum represents the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And it was given to her to share with the men, to remind them of their own mother's heartbeat. That they had taken so many lives, they've been fighting for so long, they forgot the sound of their own mother's heartbeat from the time before they were born. So she gave the drum to the men. And they say the first time that drum made a sound, this is a small drum, mind you, you can kind of feel it. I felt it. But the first time they heard that sound, they say that was the first time that those men and the people around the drum heard something like that sound and felt something like that sound. It changed something inside of them. Maybe it did remind them of the time before they were born and their own mother's heartbeat. Or maybe it was a spirit in the drum changing something inside of them. But whatever it was, it had changed them. And that young girl went to the Sioux or Lakota communities and shared the drum with those people. And they've been fighting those people for generations. And the grandparents were at war with the Dakota people before this young girl came along. He shared that drum with them, and that drum had a profound effect on them. Eventually, that got the Dakota men and Ojibwe men talking, and they decided not to fight anymore. They decided there was better things to do with their lives instead of taking each other's. They recognized that the people were almost always hungry. They were almost always sad, always mourning the loss of people whose lives they had taken. So since then, they say Ojibwe people and Dakota people have not fought since then. The drum is a tool to bring people together. Our largest gatherings in our communities are always centered around the drum. And almost all First Nations cultures in Turtle Island or North America, we all have the drum in common. You cannot have a single ceremony without there being a drum present. You can have a couple, but most of them have the drum. I also recognize I've been fortunate enough to almost travel around the world. One year I went to South Korea and my drum and dance group was invited there. And I was fortunate enough to meet other cultures from around the world. And because I make drums, I'm naturally curious about other types of drums and the stories behind them. And that's when it dawned on me. Almost every culture in this world has a form of drum. Whether it's making the sound with sticks, we all have that beat. We all sing. That's the one thing the Creator gave all of humankind that we all share in common. So I believe the drum and the singing makes the Creator's favorite music. Because why else would almost every type of human being in all our different parts of the world have the drum? So it can be very healing as well. So we use that in that regard. And I went off on a tangent there, but the unfortunate thing is within Canada, Indigenous peoples are overrepresented within the criminal justice system. 16 years ago, we started offering our halfway house bed services at our Saugatuck shelter. And I wanted to learn very slowly because the potential to make big mistakes were real. But I didn't want to open up with 20 beds and make a horrible mistake and jeopardize this opportunity to grow. So we started with one bed. We worked slowly and learned slowly. We were up to 5 beds for men leaving federal corrections for quite some time. Now we're up to 6. Eventually, I want to expand our halfway house bed services and have a standalone space. Corrections Canada seems to be the barrier. I'm very fortunate that Michael came along across my path and wanted to collaborate in researching Indigenous men, both here in Australia leaving corrections, as well as Indigenous men in Canada. And I think we were the natural partner for Michael to reach out to, because unfortunately, we're the only halfway house bed provider in the entire province of Ontario, the only and only one. And this is despite the fact that Indigenous peoples are overrepresented within the criminal justice system and in corrections. Approximately 33% of Indigenous peoples are in the federal correctional system. They're incarcerated. So we're the only one. So percentage wise, that would be 0.00 something that we're represent helping Indigenous peoples reintegrate. We know we do it very well, and we know we do it better than non-Indigenous service providers. And the reason we know we do it well is when men come to us, they'll see people that might look like them. They'll see people who may have come from their First Nation community or neighboring communities. They'll work with our staff who have similar family experiences related to intergenerational trauma. And we'll help bring them back in the community. We'll create a brotherhood among them of mutual supports. We'll help them relearn their teachings of their peoples. We'll have them sit around the drum and feel that heartbeat of Mother Earth and help warm their hearts. And we do this with kindness. We do this with love. We do this with respect and humility. I'm not going to read all of these stats, but I'm very pleased that we offer these services for Indigenous men. I so badly want to expand. But as I said, Corrections Canada is a huge barrier. But right now, we're also engaged in another study with York University in Toronto. And I've asked them to evaluate our service and compare us to mainstream halfway houses. And apparently we have a 90% success rate of men that come to us from corrections and complete without breaking their parole. And afterwards, we help them get housing and we help them become part of the community again. To make them feel like they have worth, to make them feel they can give back to community. And it's very profound for a lot of the men we work with. And this is more of our services. So we have a street outreach program. This is an old picture of an older man. We have more newer ones now. But our street outreach service, it started before my time at NamiRes. But during my time at NamiRes, we transformed from going out on the streets and loading up our vans with hot soup and sandwiches and sleeping bags and toiletries to help them to survive out on the streets. And we transitioned to this notion called housing first. Housing first is this idea where instead of giving people supplies to survive on the streets, you offer them housing first before anything else. Before you refer someone to, say, drug or alcohol treatment or harm reduction services, you offer them housing first. Before you refer them to mental health services or mental health treatments that might be residential, you get them into housing first. In Canada, housing has been declared a human right, and everyone deserves to be housed. Unfortunately, that's not happening in large enough numbers. And unfortunately, I've witnessed since COVID that actually homelessness has increased. So housing first used to work beautifully when there was more affordable rental housing stock within Toronto. And right now it's incredibly difficult to find affordable housing. So our equalizer is I write for grants to get housing subsidies to give them an allowance to help make the unaffordable rents a little more affordable. We also help the people get welfare or Ontario Disability Plan payments. We used to have an elder that would ride around in the van. And the beauty of having an elder ride in the van is our staff used to say they were treated like rock stars. What they would bring culture Whereas our typically younger staff may not have that cultural knowledge. They could speak their first language, whether it's Cree or Ojibwe. They can converse with the guys in their first language, whereas our younger staff might not have that ability. And the cool thing with working with the elders was they would help build that rapport with people that were homeless much more faster than our younger staff could just by themselves because of that knowledge and wisdom they carry. Also, a lot of our staff deal with death all the time, and it's hard. Our work is hard. It hurts our heart sometimes when people we worked with for many years pass away. But the elders will help them with cultural stories around grieving to help them, be able to understand life a little better, to help them to work through that grieving process and the difficulties. Unfortunately, our outreach team, as well as some of our other teams, we often organize funerals for people. We often do them in a cultural way. We have our elders that help with those things. That's not part of our mission statement, but when someone dies, we need to send them home in that good way. So we do that for them if their family's not there to help organize those things. So at 26 Bond Road, that's our Saugatay shelter. We have another program called Minokanagowan. The Minokanagowan program is a program in Ojibwe, which means looking for the good in myself, looking for the good mind. We used to call it the special needs program, but then we realized that's a negative label. Guys aren't going to go around and say, "Yeah, I'm in the special needs program," right? So we changed the name. We gave an elder tobacco to try to come up with a name for us, and that was the name that was given to us. It's an intensive case management program, strictly for Indigenous men who experience severe addictions as well as mental health. And I recognized back when I first started at NAMI Res that we seem to be a revolving door for men that have severe mental health issues and addictions. Sometimes if their mental health was undiagnosed and they weren't dealing with their mental health issues and their behavior was out of whack and it disturbed other residents, we would discharge them and send them on their way and give them a service restriction for a period of time. Almost always they would come back, and I recognize they would sometimes come back in worse shape when they previously left us. That's when I recognized these men are falling through the cracks. Wherever they go elsewhere for services, no one's helping them properly. So I was fortunate enough to write some grants and get funding. And we hired, initially, that was the program that hired our nurse, as well as 2 intensive case managers. And the intensive case managers, they were to follow their client wherever they might go through the whole continuum of homelessness. So if they were outdoor homeless, they would go visit them in the parks and build a rapport with them. The nurse, she would accompany them to medical appointments, whether it's seeing a psychiatrist or if they end up in a psych ward at the hospital, they would visit them. Being an Indigenous man with severe mental health issues or addictions, 9 times out of 10, they wouldn't get quality care in a hospital or a medical type setting. But if you went there with a nurse, we hired a First Nations nurse, and she was a tough lady. I wouldn't want to cross her and meet her in a back alleyway in the middle of the night because she'd scare me. So she was the right person for that job to advocate for our men when they would have to go to a hospital or a health clinic. And she was a staunch advocate for them. That program worked really well for the men in that program, as it still does. Nowadays, we also infuse life skills programs for the men, where we'll bring them together and we'll do field trips sometimes. We'll do cooking classes. Some of the men have been homeless so long that maybe they didn't learn how to cook for themselves. So they'll cook foods that aren't very healthy. Among our Indigenous population in Canada, diabetes is rampant, as well as cardiovascular disease and heart problems. So we try to help the men to eat more nutritious meals and healthier meals and educate them about that. And we also do fun things. So we might take them to a Toronto Blue Jays game. Well, probably not anymore because it's probably going to be unaffordable now that they
almost won the World Series. Toronto has a bunch of professional teams that are second best. It's unfortunate. And, so we bring them to different social types of settings, a trip to Niagara Falls or a trip out on the land. And the goal of that is to help create a positive peer group among the men that have severe mental health issues. Because I'll give you an example. Say, for instance, you might have severe schizophrenia. You might have difficulty being able to relate with others who don't have that affliction. But if you're in a peer group of other folks that have similar types of afflictions, you might be able to relate to each other a little better. You might be able to create a positive peer group where your brother will look out for you and vice versa. Well, that's worked wonderfully. And we now have that with some of the men where they'll look out for each other. They'll visit each other when they're not involved in our programs. Well, staff, they have a van and they'll visit them in their homes when they're housed. You know, make sure they're following through on their treatment plans. When they do an intake, we do an assessment. And I did an evaluation of our program about 10 years ago. The evaluation came back and it showed that our staff back then were working with the cream that rises to the top, those that have maybe minimal issues because they were easier to work with. We introduced an assessment tool to assess those that have the more severe needs. And that's the group we work with. And as their needs become less severe, we'll move them on to other case managers that work with those with less higher needs. We have our agency-wide services right here. Gim Koa Ji Chug, which means reclaiming my spirit. And that's a lot of our cultural work, is helping our men reclaim the spirit within themselves, about our culture, about learning about our spirituality, because that's something that has helped our people for over 20,000 years within Turtle Island or North America. We have access to a variety of ceremonies such as sweat lodge. We have elders that come in that share cultural knowledge. We have teachings for men, as I explained earlier. So, and I also talked about the Epinamoaning program. The one thing I didn't mention about Epinamoaning is a few blocks away, we have a garden where we grow indigenous medicinal plants. We grow our 4 sacred medicines there, which is cedar. That's an easy one to grow, but it's a big tree. But we grow tobacco. I understand tobacco originally came from our peoples, and then Europeans came and they used that and brought it all over the world. And it really originally was a medicine. And it was a medicine that was given to, in our stories, Anishinaabe people or Ojibwe people from Nanabush. And when Nanabush was lowered down from the spirit world, they say that in Nanabush's moccasins were seeds from the tobacco. And the tobacco was the first plant that was placed on Turtle Island. And often if we want to communicate to the creator or ask an elder a question or request a ceremony, or if our heart is hurting and we're sad, we'll offer our tobacco, whether it's to a fire, whether it's putting it in the water, under a tree, or gifting it to someone. Often too, if you want to communicate directly to the creator, we have a tradition of pipes, as many Indigenous peoples do in North America or Turtle Island. And they say that's a direct communication to the creator. You load that pipe bowl with the tobacco and you smoke it. Our smoking wasn't for recreational purposes, it was for prayer purposes, and it's been abused. And now we know tobacco causes all kinds of diseases. That was never the intent, it was a medicine. So we teach those people about that original plant. The tobacco plant, the reason we offer it for gifts or if we want to have success in hunting is because it was the first plant. It's the boss medicine. So we offer that boss medicine as our gratitude for thanks for asking a question. And often, I know in my life when I've gone through some very difficult times, I've prayed with my tobacco and asked the Creator for help. And every time my prayers have been answered. Very fortunate. I believe in our medicines. We grow another plant medicine that's one of our 4 sacred medicines called sweetgrass or wingush, you say in Ojibwe. In Ojibwe, that means the hair of Mother Earth.
It's a very aromatic smelling grass. It grows long, and often we'll braid it in three. And when we braid it in three, that represents the joining together of the body, mind, and spirit. And when it dries, we burn it, and it makes a smoke. And I understand it's somewhat similar to the smoking ceremony that First Nations people have here, except your smoking ceremony is like our smudging on steroids. There's far more smoke from the smoking ceremonies here. I was really impressed when I was able to participate in a smoking ceremony. And our smudging when we burn these medicines is not quite as much smoke as there is with the ceremonies here. We also grow sage. And in the Ojibwe language, they call sage mashkode bijiki. And what that means is like the grass from buffaloes. And we'll dry that out and burn it, and we'll smudge again. And often when we smudge with any of those medicines, when we burn them, sometimes you can even mix the four together. You kind of wave it over your head so you have clear thoughts. A little bit over your eyes, but obviously not too much over your eyes because it's smoke. But so you'll see clearly. Over the mouth, so that when you speak good words, and over the heart, so that you speak from the heart. So that's some of the medicines the men grow, and we teach them about that. They also grow other herbal medicines that have medicinal qualities, and it's seasonal. So in the winter months, they'll work in a greenhouse, and they'll plant seedlings, and they'll learn about those seeds and how our people took care of seeds. And we even have one tobacco that originally came from South America because our people did vast trading all over the place. And sometimes they'll find Ojibwe artifacts far, far away from our territories because we had vast trading routes. So we'll learn about the seeds and the knowledge related to the seeds. We'll nurture those seeds and grow them into little seedlings when they start popping up out of the ground. Once the frost goes away, they'll go to our garden and they'll plant it in the earth. And then they'll nurture those plants throughout the spring and summer. Then in the fall, they'll harvest those plants when they're ready to harvest according to the knowledge about harvesting them. Then in the winter and in the fall, they'll dry those plants. They'll hang them up. I love it when they hang up the different medicinal plants because it creates a very nice smell in our spaces where we hang them up. They'll also grow corn, beans, and squash. Lots of Indigenous knowledge around that. Corn is something that Indigenous peoples were traditionally grew that we shared with other parts of the world. And in the winter months, we'll bring in knowledge keepers or elders that have that traditional plant knowledge, and they'll share that knowledge with the men. And they might learn how to treat minor ailments like a cold with some of the plant medicines. And it's helping them learn that plant knowledge. And it's very healing and profound for the men to learn those things. There's something to be said about growing a little seedling and nurturing it all the way to harvesting it, and then also harvesting the seeds to grow the next generation of those plants. It can be very profound for the men, and them watching that life cycle of the plant can really help them with their healing journey. So that's our garden. Yes. Okay, a couple minutes. All right. So I'll start talking like an auctioneer now. Well, I talked about the Minnetonka mental health case manager. I have a video which I'm not going to show. This is our long-term housing. As I mentioned before, housing is a cure to homelessness. I believe our houses should not be slums. Our men deserve good. They deserve quality. These are the first two houses we purchased 15 years ago. They're in the west end of Toronto. Every time we purchased houses, I deal with opposition. I deal with neighbors that are racist. I deal with regulations. If I purchase these houses yesterday, I can expect to wait at least 2 to 3 years for a building permit. We always renovate our houses. We always make sure they're energy efficient. We make sure in some instances they're zero net emissions. We gained our knowledge in building and construction from renovating our shelters. And we do it usually on time and on budget. with our Sagate shelter and renovated that, it was under budget. And with our surplus dollars, we put solar panels on our roof. I like doing innovative things. I like having that track record and having bragging rights that we know what we're doing. Because often there's scrutiny towards Indigenous organizations and stereotypes that we don't know how to do things. Well, maybe we don't know how to do things the average way, but at our place, we know how to do it well. So right now we have 2 houses under construction and they should be ready in, I'll say February. And that will bring on another 32 units of affordable housing. Let me see here. I talked about the permits a little bit. Oh, there's this ridiculous notion in Canada of heritage conservation. So ridiculous. Because the heritage they want to have conservation for is second-rate architects that came to Europe that couldn't make it in Europe in the first place. And they would build their architecture that people would want to honor and preserve. But not once has heritage ever honored our 20,000 years worth of history. And at one point for one of our new shelters, the City of Toronto's Heritage Conservation Board were giving me a hard time, saying our new shelter design has to be compliant with their ridiculous notions of heritage. So I told them, I said, wait a minute, isn't this the day and age of reconciliation? You know, I think I'm going to write a full-page open letter in the Toronto Star and address it to your office and talk about your ridiculous notion of heritage. I'm sure the readership would really be in support of what I write. So are you on our side with reconciliation? Or are you going to be a barrier? And quickly they changed their minds and they became our biggest supporters. So I love that. This is our organizational chart. I know a lot of non-Indigenous organizations use a pyramid model where, you know, my job, the executive director or the board are at the top. They always fail to mention clients. Well, we flipped that. We got rid of the pyramid. We made it more flat. So we have the clients in the center. We wrap around all of our services around our clients. We also have the elders that support the clients as well as our staff. And I often say that this looks like traditional Ojibwe or Cree beadwork. And I always tell our staff, we have quarterly staff meetings. I always recite this org chart with them every single time. And I let them know we might not be the most prettiest flower or the nicest smelling flower, but we're a mighty flower. And all our work collectively helps the clients, whether you're a frontline worker, whether you're an administration staff. My role as the executive director, I'm looking at resources inside the organization to make sure we run it well. I'm also looking at resources outside the organization to bring into our space to make things better and more efficient. My bosses are our circle of directors, and they provide governance for our organization. They're a policy circle of directors. And then, you know, we try to make our community better, like a ripple effect sort of. And we work with all ages now with our health center. We work with little babies, toddlers, children, youth, young parents, parents, grandparents, and elders. So we work with the whole gamut now. And this is a new shelter where I had to verbally wrestle with the Heritage Conservation Board, and we won the day. We were told in 2018 we get a new shelter and be ready to run. Still hasn't happened yet. I'm just really happy it's not us doing the construction. It's the city doing the construction. It's their building. And if they were able to finish in 2018, the cost of building and retrofitting that space would have been literally millions of dollars cheaper than it is now. And we're no further ahead yet. But we have all our designs done and everything. And finally, last is,
Dave. Sorry.
yes,
Can you just go back a slide, please?
Yep.
I wonder if you'd share with the group the colours, the
Okay.
of the colours, please.
So with this being a shelter, I didn't want it to be a tourist attraction, but I also wanted it to be unmistakably Indigenous. So in our teachings, we have the 4 colors. The yellow, red, black, and white. It means many things. It means unity. It means it can represent the 4 seasons that we have, but it also represents what I like sharing a lot is the balance of our mental aspect of ourselves, the balance of our physical aspect, emotional and spiritual. If you're out of balance physically, it's going to affect other aspects and throw them at a kilter. So if we help our men to be whole, we're helping them to be in greater balance. And a lot of our cultural services instill them being mentally healthy, physically healthy, spiritually healthy, and emotionally healthy. So we put those colors there. I didn't want a bunch of tourists coming to Toronto and want to see our space because after all, it is a homeless shelter. But I wanted them to know we're still here. So this is going to be one of the first net zero emission buildings in Toronto. And I'm so proud of that. I don't know if it's going to be a first now. It was supposed to be in 2018. There's probably others now. This is our health center called the Doje Minno Nasewanung. In Ojibwe, that means a place of healthy breathing. We're only 5.5 years old. I never wanted to get into health at all. I'm not an expert in health whatsoever, but I have hired staff that do the health work. I have some wonderful directors who I trust to do that work. We initially started out of COVID. We were the second shelter in the city of Toronto to have COVID. There was no help for us. I had a pandemic plan in place, but it didn't tell us what to do when we had COVID in our space. I reached out to this First Nations doctor who happened to have a grant from Indigenous Services Canada to count Indigenous people that have COVID. And she didn't know how to do it. So I told her, hey, you have this vacant building I was contemplating selling to leverage more affordable housing, but I don't want to sell our assets. So why don't you use that space? We'll do testing. And if people test positive for COVID, count them. I said, oh, okay. And that's how it started. We eventually morphed into providing vaccines for COVID. After that, we morphed into providing childhood vaccines for young people that might have missed their school-age regimen of vaccines. We started offering primary care. We also have elders that come in and do traditional healing. They'll prescribe plant medicines for people to help cure different types of ailments. And this is an overview of some of the services. It's an emerging program, and already we're starting to outgrow our space. But it's a vital service. Our community trusts us. We worked hard through our years of offering services to build that trust with our Indigenous community. And we're a space that they now come to seek different types of health services or to spend time with their elders. And I'm very proud of this service. Often it's difficult to get funding resources from the Ministry of Health, but we're in it for the long run, and we'll get to where we need to be to offer optimal health services for our community. So as we say in Ojibwe language, it's miigwech, or thank you. Nyawin is a Mohawk word for thank you. And if we have time for questions, I'd be happy to offer questions. I'm very happy I was able to present today. It's not often I have this amount of time to share all the services we offer, and I'm often limited by time and have to offer key aspects of the services we run. So thank you, everybody.
We can probably just go for another couple of minutes if anyone has any questions, seeing as we've got Steve here.
No, just reflect on the colours. Steve and Auntie Mary pointed the colours out. Well, we have similar colours, and so I wonder what your thoughts are as well, Auntie Mary.
It's probably, thanks, Michael. Yeah, yes, you're young, Steve. It's being able to follow the journey through the eyes of my family. I suppose it's a product of finding a wisdom for of using the short interpretation around that, and it's probably worldwide. And it's so good to hear the strength and as you said, resilience before. Are you talking about the colours or?
Oh, the colours in general.
Yeah, the colours were, there couldn't be anything else. Right, and, yeah, but just going back to where I was, before I put myself back on track, is, it's always really empowering and strengthening to realise you're not alone. Ultimately, yeah, you've got to be understand that, and it's probably the humanness that allows people like Michael and, you know, yourself to develop that relationship where you can leave the country and come meet us, right? It's, yeah, it's so good for you to take your time out of this, but it's our country. We call it our country. There's other words. It's what we believe. That you believe it. We see the colours, this, you know, the similarities of the colours, and ours is formed in the circle, and yours in terms of the four areas, the spaces, the four bits of. It's going to be connected if there's something like that into understanding, be able to share it too. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike.
Steve, I wonder if you can answer this, but I'm curious about the demographic of the men who engage in your programs. Do you see patterns across, like, even just the age of the consumers, and if there's any sort of rhyme or reason or pattern?
I haven't done an analysis of the demographics in quite a number of years. I would say maybe about 12. The last time I did, I saw some very interesting figures. Back then, the average age of the men we served were in their early to mid 40s. A lot of them had come through adoption breakdowns or foster care system, you know, having negative experiences within the child welfare system. We did have a few that went through residential schools as well, but that was the majority. I also found the regions where the men came from predominantly, particularly with focus on the First Nations men, that they came from what we call the North Shore and Manitoulin Island, which is about, depending which end you would go, 5 to 8 hours north of Toronto. And predominantly that's where they came from. Among the cultural groups that we predominantly served among the First Nations men, overwhelmingly they were Ojibwe peoples, followed by the Cree people. And we actually had very few Six Nations people, which were the Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Seneca, and the other ones that I forget.
So, Steve, at the 10-year anniversary of YouTube page, the product commissioner, probably I could be wrong, but said that because you're talking about data and that, I don't know whether you say data or data, but I'll say data. Data is sexy. So I think that just the collection of it in terms of, do you do it? Sorry, I am. Do you collect data?
We do.
You do. What do you do with it?
Well, often I'll use it for our purposes.
Yes.
We guard it very carefully.
Yes.
We have data sovereignty. I won't share it willingly,
Yes.
and sometimes I'll share it even reluctantly.
Yeah.
But we use it for our own purposes to help us make informed decisions on the directions to go to serve maybe perhaps unmet needs.
Yes.
But I would say the department that does the most data collection would be our health service.
Yes.
We do share that with the Ministry of Health. We do have some data that we don't share with them and we just keep for ourselves. We're working with the City of Toronto to come up with a data sovereignty agreement that respects and privileges our First Nations data.
Right.
And some of the researchers we worked with, many of them are First Nations. And actually I have the luxury now of saying no to researchers. And I often say no to them if they don't have Indigenous methodologies and they don't respect data sovereignty. I say no all the time, but I say yes once in a while. Obviously, I said yes to Michael because we're very like-minded that way. We work with Indigenous researchers now as well, which is a luxury that I haven't seen earlier on when I started working in this field. So often when the researchers might do a presentation, they'll reach out to me a week before, shortly beforehand, and ask permission to use that data for their presentations. And I really appreciate that and honor that. I know within the shelter sector, we've been excluded from associations like the Toronto Shelter Network. And one time they used one of our research studies that examined Indigenous men that died prematurely without our permission.
Right.
So I phoned up their director and I gave them crap.
Yes.
And I told them to remove it immediately.
Yeah.
And that you don't understand the principles of OCAP. And so they removed it and they apologized profusely. And that diminished my trust with them.
It's probably a common story in terms of, not seeing the forest for the trees, or the forest of the trees for the forest.
Mhm.
That interpretation. And thanks for sharing that research. The organisation you visited yesterday is into that similar situation, but in terms of ensuring that communities' life experiences is returned. And I'm just wondering whether, could you mention the elders of the army?
Numbers, yeah.
Whether they are not researchers too, I know they're probably storytellers, but I wonder if you haven't looked at them in terms of, data being sexy. Well, that was the product. I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Usually at the beginning of a research study,
Yeah.
we'll start with ceremony,
Yes,
whether it's a pipe ceremony,
yes,
whether it's bringing the researcher team, whether they're Indigenous or not, into a sweat lodge ceremony,
yeah,
and trying to achieve like-mindedness.
yes,
And so often it will start that way. Also, when some of the research is being disseminated, I'll ask for a policy forum and I'll try to invite key government people. Sometimes we get them, sometimes we don't. And ask for briefings as well of the findings of the research so we can use them in handy ways to influence potential funding opportunities or other types of opportunities.
Sorry, were you going to say something? Just, so I was looking at it in terms of a cultural visibility aspect sort of thing. So I sit on a couple of research proposals, right? Maybe it's after the proposal, but anyway, I sit there. So I call myself a CI and let's just speak of the national, content, probably research to the converted either. So I see myself as a cultural interrogator, cultural investigator as opposed to a chief investigator.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know how they see me. But anyway, I keep going back and I always have the tuppence worth in terms of anything this way. Why am I that turn up or that, you're assuming that I know how to get there, and they might have the car, they might have the fuel, and that was what I was talking about is some of those cultural, it's not cultural, concept, you got a car, is it registered, you got a license, can you drive, has it got 4 tyres, there are things around just marking people out as being absent because they couldn't get there, you know, to be a part of the research would benefit them compared to life. And I think with the elders, probably, you didn't call them elders though,
So we call them elders.
elders, okay. And I know you used to, you know, as you shared a couple of texts ago about the ceremony, but in terms of them and what they could bring, their perspective, you know, you talked about the grants and things like that, you know, and is there a role for those elders in not actually the data of that research? Just a brief thought there. Maybe you and Michael can yarn about it and, you know, see if he's interpret my comments, my question. But just now, Michael, you were going to say something, so I need to take a minute.
Oh, thank you, Anne-Mary. I'd be happy to come and present some of the results from the work we did with Steve, if that would be of interest to you in the centre.
Yeah.
I haven't really presented it other than when we presented with Steve, so we might try and do that on Zoom, or if you're happy, I show you what we're going to present. The process at Toronto University was have a circle of elders, because it was in partnership with Professor Suzanne Stewart. And she felt that I should present the plan to the circle of elders, and so went to the lodge on campus, and you talk about what it is you're planning on doing, and they kind of say yes or no. They kind of just sat there and looked at each other for a while. I'm like, they're going to say no. And then the elder, who was leading the circle that day, she turned and smiled, and it was all okay. But ceremony is very much part of everything and in all official proceedings. And so we're in different places. And so it's really, this is not to run down the universities in Brunswick, but we seem to have a stronger structure around having Deputy Vice Chancellor Indigenous and things like that. Well, they don't necessarily have that at every university in Canada.
No.
So we often think they're much further ahead, but in some ways we're just in different places doing different things. It's not a sort of a line where we all go past the same spot. We just have different ways of doing things. But very similar challenges in Canada as here.
Yes.
And the effects of the residential schools was horrendous, like our stolen generation. A lot of the men I interviewed there, in one way or another, had been affected by residential schools, which was also the case with the men I interviewed here.
Yeah.
I'll move that. Oh, there's a question online?
Yeah.
The speakers.
I think
You
they
should move that, moving that up.
That's the person online that had their hand up.
it's not.
Hello, I'm Jermaine Herborn. I'm a Far North Queensland boy, Aboriginal man from up far north. I'm a proud Gogolmularigi man. But I really was intrigued by your delivery today. I'm also, I work at the Queensland Mental Health Commission, program manager for the social emotional wellbeing. So growing up in Far North Queensland, we do a lot of this stuff here. I speak two of my languages. I had the privilege to actually learn most of my culture, and I do ceremonies back up home as well. And just in the prison systems up north, it's overrepresented. So it's like over 80%, not 30%. So especially up north, Far North Queensland. But I was intrigued by your the drum beats, because your drum beats and culture, and like how I grew up, is that when we do a corroboree with the clapping of our hands and the tapstick beat, is basically we tap our babies on their backs with the beat to calm them down. So that's how we instill the rhythm into their body, by tapping the rhythm of our corroborees on their back, and we sing the songs in their ear, so they remember those songs and they feel the rhythm and also the spirit of our ancestors. That's the way we do it up north. I was also intrigued about how you utilize a lot of the elders part of your in your services. That's one thing that we have lacking in our communities. There's not much elders mentors in our communities, and we're trying to bring that towards. Is that Auntie Mary there?
Yep.
Auntie Mary, that's you.
Hey, I see you.
How are you? Dearly to hear your voice.
Same way.
Yeah, so and you talked about smudging and that, like in our ceremonies up north, of course you got the general smoking ceremony, but up north we use a plant called jujubala in my language. And that's an iron tree. So we don't use any leaf. We have to get the significant leaf for that ceremony. But the way we welcome up north is that we rub our sweat on your face so that the smell of the spirits can smell you when you're going through our country, so nothing goes wrong or no accidents happen. And the smoking ceremony for us up north is to chase spirits out of the house.
Yeah.
So away spirits. So there's different forms of how we do smoking ceremonies to actually get bad spirits out of the house, because we don't want to chase the good spirits out as well. We have a lot of men's groups and women's groups over here, brother. That's doing a lot of good work. That's not funded. That are preventing suicide, post-vention work. I can go on, brother. I can go down in a rabbit hole about the amount of work that our mob are doing over this way in Queensland is just significant work, and they're not getting funded. Some of them doing it out of their own pockets. So, because we know we're not going to wait around for anybody. And we innovated a lot of the programs today that a lot of the non-Indigenous people have implemented into their system. The social emotional well-being stuff is actually was by us, Indigenous people, because we heal our mob inside out, not outside in. So we don't, like our mob just don't go to a clinic and put a Band-Aid on or give them a tablet to overcome their mental health. So that's why we have these men's group programs where we go camping, reconnection to land, culture. I know, like, I read a lot of stuff about UMOB over there, Canada, about what happened over there as well. Same over here. You might hear about the discrete communities. There were actually missions. Cherbourg was a mission, Woorabinda, Palm Island, Yarrabah. My mob came from Mona Mission. So they were all institutes set up for our mob to you probably read about it, brother. So quite similar, but big thank you to the elders that kept the culture intact and the language. And today, that's why I speak 2 languages today, Gugu and Yirrama language. But I'd like to thank you, brother, for your delivery. And I might come over to Toronto one day and visit those places, man.
Okay.
But it was awesome. Awesome delivery. Oh, sorry. Question. Just what kind of relations do you have with the Canadian corrections for the drop-off? Like, yeah, when released offenders get dropped off, like when they get released.
So often our case managers will do in-reach where they'll go into the jails, and they have these things called fairs where other halfway houses will come in and introduce themselves to the men inside. Additionally, I share cultural knowledge. I've been invited to the jails. There's about 5 penitentiaries centrally located around Kingston, Ontario. And I've been invited to go in and share drum teachings with the men. And often that can be their first connection with our organization, whether it's myself going in and having a circle with the men, or whether it's our staff going there and attending these fairs. We also have relationships with the Indigenous staff that work within the jails. They have Indigenous services. And I often say our people are relationship people. If you're a stranger, it's hard to build trust right away. But if we spend time with them and get to know them, we build that relationship and nurture it. So often we'll invest time in trying to get to know the Indigenous staff or some of the staff that are allies to our community. And often they'll refer people to us so that it can be an option for them.
I think that's the gap that we have in Queensland, bro. Is that we don't even know when our family members are being released, whereabouts, where and that over here, and some of them are referred to our rehabs, Indigenous rehabs we have. Like, I don't know if you heard about our Indigenous rehabs we have here. We've got Gindaja, we've got Quace down here as well. These services that, you know, and Gumby Gumby, and a lot of some of them have Indigenous released offenders, but a lot of them are, because a lot of them aren't allowed to go back to community as well.
Right,
So a lot of them result into homelessness in Brisbane, across Queensland on the east coast, but I don't know about in the western areas of Queensland. But that's one of the main things that we don't know when our mob are getting dropped off. We don't know where or what happens, and then we find out like 2 weeks down the track that they've been released. So that's one of the main things that we're not there to actually pick them up and start their healing journey.
I'm sorry to hear that. It's very unfortunate.
Yeah, and there's lack of Indigenous programs in the prisons here in Queensland, just so you know.
All right, I'm sorry to sort of jump in and cut the short, but we better finish, just aware people will have other meetings, et cetera, to get to. But I just really wanted to say thanks again, Steve. Not only sharing your knowledge about your programs and your expertise in delivering them, but, as a non-Indigenous person, it's always such a great privilege that you're willing to share your cultural knowledge as well, because non-Indigenous people that you don't know. And, I'd say the same about Michael and Auntie Mary and Jermaine there as well. I think as non-Indigenous people, we're really grateful to have the opportunity to listen and learn from you and your sort of cultural knowledge as well. So thank you. And just before we finish up, we've got a little gift for you, just to say thank you for coming all the way up here to the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara peoples and visiting up here. So thanks for coming, and we really appreciate it.